There is a condition, however, that explains all of Jacob's economic problems. That condition is trade. And again, you'll notice that we are presuming that there are people in the land, just like there were people when the Nephites landed on the coast. There are archaeological populations in Highland Guatemala. These people probably engaged in trade with them. If we make that presumption, a very logical presumption of trade, human beings trade, it's one of the human universals. There have been anthropologists who studied the things that make us alike. Trade is one of them. Gossip's another, by the way. If we take a look at trade, lots of things happen. If we assume that the gold and silver are being worked using metalworking skills that Nephi could have taught them, then these worked goods could have an exchange value with other cities, and the resulting importation of goods creates a situation where those who engaged in the trade accumulate more of their unique prestige goods than those who did not trade outside of their own city. Thus, trade provides exactly the conditions that Jacob is combating, that of social differentiation. The process of trade would have brought not only esoteric goods, but also a mechanism for the very social differentiation that Jacob excoriates. This is the cultural problem behind the costly apparel that will become the hallmark of one of the themes of a competing religious idea throughout the book, the rest of the Book of Mormon. In Mesoamerica, the time period of the early Nephites saw developing social stratification in the Maya cities and an increasing pressure towards kingship in those same cities. Interestingly enough, we've got two pressures that the Maya world is beginning to see at exactly the same time, that we have a king in the city of Nephi and we have costly apparel in the city of Nephi. And these pressures are happening all throughout the Maya lands, which just so happen to include Highland Guatemala. This social differentiation was supported by the accumulation of esoteric goods, often displayed on the clothing of the elite. As Sheely and Matthews put it, people throughout Mesoamerica wore these currencies as jewelry and clothing to display the wealth and the enterprise of their families. Bringing in clothing and adornment from other locations is a way to create a differentiation in dress. When the clothing itself becomes the display mode for elite consumption of goods, then the costly apparel in and of itself becomes the marker of increasing economic and social distances between developing classes. It's important to remember that Jacob's issue is never wealth, but rather the social stratification that was based on wealth. The costly apparel was a unique Mesoamerican mode of creating and displaying that social separation. The pressures for creating social stratification that we see beginning in the city of Nephi mirror the greater trend in the entire Mesoamerican culture area at exactly this point in time. The presence of trade relations with other Mesoamerican communities therefore provides a context in which we may understand Jacob's sermon denouncing social stratification through wealth, particularly wealth manifest through costly apparel. It's that very same context that can explain why he preaches against polygyny and some of the anomalies of that discourse. By looking at the cultural background, we have to again note that Jacob's denunciation of polygyny is problematic for multiple reasons, none of which have anything to do with the obvious difference between Jacob's denunciation and historical LDS polygamy. First, Jacob consistently equates having more than one wife with whoredoms and unchastity. This is as impossible as valuable gold that is easy to find. Note that Jacob clearly speaks of wives, not of harlots. All societies that accept multiple wives have legal regulations that legitimize the union. A plural wife is a wife, and relations with a wife do not fall under the rubric of whoredoms in any society. Jacob also describes the fate of the wives and the children in ways that don't make any sense. He speaks of the daughters of Jerusalem being led away captive and that their children were being brought into destruction. Now, it's hard to see how the very fact of multiple wives could cause those things. There's lots of things that can happen to wives and children in marriage, but the very fact that you get married really doesn't create captivity, as much as we make jokes that says that it does. Once again, the cultural context of Mesoamerica gives us a way of seeing this text and removing those difficulties. The same context of trade provides the answer. The development of social segregation in Mesoamerica has been the subject of multiple theories and studies. One study used archaeological information to support the hypothesis that the development of institutionalized social inequality and political privilege was due to the internal social pressures of personal advancement. In terms of this theory, there were individuals who would seek improvement in their position, and they call them aggrandizers. These are people who say, gee, I want to feel like I'm better than I am. And so they go about finding ways to improve their relative position in the community. Aggrandizers, and this is a citation here, aggrandizers simply strive to become more influential. It is the successful deployment of resources and labor that ultimately ensure the social and political longevity of an aggrandizer. Building renown commences in the nuclear unit of production. An aggrandizer first accumulates deployable resources by the sweat of his brow and through the effort of his wife or wives and children. The more wives, the better. Mesoamerican had a long tradition of plural wives. And plural wives come into the picture precisely because they are in a position to assist in the development of excess economic goods. When we talk about the people who are going to be engaged in trade, and we talk about the people who are bringing back these costly apparel, we're talking about Nephites who are aggrandizers. They're trying to improve their position. That's exactly what Jacob is getting unhappy about, is that they're trying to improve their position above and beyond their neighbors. Where they get this good is by going to some other area and trading with someone. Who has the most available goods to trade? The man with multiple wives. The man who's going to get the goods sees the mechanism for providing excess labor and says, that's probably a pretty good idea. If I had an extra wife around, I could produce a little bit excess and I'd have more goods to trade. And that very context of trading with another society, another culture that has multiple wives, creates the condition where these men are going to want to have multiple wives. The last of these conditions that lets us know something about is when you trade wives with communities. We all know that people will swap wives and swap women as ways to cement relationships. Cementing economic relationships is probably a good idea to do. And what is probably happening with the women who are being led away captive is they're being sent to other communities as plural wives in the other communities. It's also easy to see a child whose world will be destroyed if they go live in a place that does not believe in God. Now, while the elements of the material from Enos to Omni are also elucidated by this interpretive framework of Mesoamerica, the next strong connection to Mesoamerican culture comes with the flight of the first Mosiah, Mosiah I, and his followers to the land of Zarahemla. The history of Zarahemla involves another cultural area of Mesoamerica. In the ethnic history of Mesoamerica, the Olmec were the dominant political cultural influence prior to the rise of the Maya city-states. The transition from Olmec to Maya was not abrupt in either time or space. There was a continuation. Things kind of flowed. There was no time when they said, oops, I'm no longer Olmec, I'm now Maya. It just didn't work that way. There was a buffer zone between the two of them, and that buffer zone lies exactly where the limited to Wantapec theory places Zarahemla and the land of all of the land of Zarahemla. In the Book of Mormon, the land of Zarahemla is a meeting place between two peoples. We have now the situation where if we look at the plausible location of the land of Zarahemla in Mesoamerica, we have a place that is no longer in Maya lands. When they were the city of Nephi, they would have been in the heart of some Maya country and would have been surrounded by Maya. They would have fled that, come up over the mountains and up into the headwaters of the Sidon. By doing that, they have moved out of the cultural realm of the Maya and they have moved into a liminal area that is in between the Olmec and the Maya areas. The Olmec by this time are fading out, but the traditions of the Olmec are moving up this valley. And what we have in this valley is an area that is not purely Olmec, but one which has heavy Olmec influences. However, in the city of Zarahemla, plausibly Santa Rosa, we also have connections back down into Island Guatemala and the city of Kaminapuyu, which is where Sorensen would have suggested that the Mosaic people came from. Let's see, where's the best place to go? The new research on linguistics that has come out for the area where we are expecting Zarahemla to be, has some information that it can teach us. The best candidate for the language of the Olmec is Mihesoke, which is a hyphenated comparison of two languages. They reconstructed it and decided to say, okay, well, it was the parent of those two daughter languages. That research was done in